fellow traders. My name is Adam, and what I'm going to be doing now is just having a look at any major news and then running through the charts, different asset classes, looking at what's kind of catching my eye, and I think most importantly what I'm probably going to stay away from. So just having a look at any kind of high impact news that's scheduled for this coming week. I'll be focusing, I think, mostly on terms of potential, or focusing mostly on items that can change or where the potential interest rate might change. All right, so that's really where I would expect or anticipate the most volatility. Not much else actually necessarily concerning me. I mean, here might have something on Thursday with regard to the ECB, but there's nothing really massively concerning this week, or nothing above average that I would expect. These will just probably have their normal traditional amounts of volatility. Now moving over to the major currency pairs, having a look at the US dollar index. So I just want to highlight here again, I've spoken about it before, but we're still very much within a range on this monthly time frame. And again, keeping in mind that the possibility that even on a bigger time frame, we are of course also within a range. So we're a range within a range. And really the point being is that yes, we can get a trend within a range, or we can just get any kind of erratic behavior. This is the annoying thing with ranges. So we're still within that, and therefore kind of price can act erratically, and we can see prices come all the way back down. So we had some strong reactions off that 93.50 level area, and price coming back down. So for me, in times like this, in locations like this, when price is stuck in these areas, really I can accept that there's no real fixed probabilities in terms of what price will do. It could start to range within these levels. It's back down at 92 now. It could decide it wants to continue lower. It could decide it wants to ping to the downside within the smaller range. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So for intraday trading, it really means focusing on it. What is it looking like on the day? What is it doing on the day? And then trading in line with that. And then having a look at the euro against the US dollar, just again seeing prices going to test this kind of close to 1.19 level to see if it can break above that. Now, that's a pretty strong move. So initially rationally it makes more sense to have a small retracement and then to see if it's going to continue back up to test those levels, if indeed that is where its longer term kind of target is, back up to 1.2. Again, it's still within the orange box that I've put in, the amber box that I've put in here, still within that range. And looking obviously pretty bullish in terms of price action, a rejection of these lows here. So looking like it's going to attempt to do that, but also struggling with some resistance that it didn't have the last time that it was here. So just again, nothing great, nothing fantastic. It doesn't look ideal for that. What I am noticing here again, sterling against the US dollar, stronger sort of high low here, a nice little uptrend, a bit more of that kind of structure to it. But again, it's got to work its way back up to 1.4. So all of these for me are really about, again, the expression would be playing it as it lies, just to on the day going to have to deal with it. In terms of medium term and longer term outlook, the picture is much less clear than usual. And so again, here looking at Australian dollar against US dollar, we're back up above these previous highs. And so kind of the logic implies that the market is that the Australian dollar is going to strengthen and potentially start to work its way up towards 77.50, these kind of previous highs up here. And so pullbacks would be potential buying opportunities to the upside. Same thing again with Kiwi dollar, which you can see here has really boosted its way above the previous highs, broken through 7.05, that weekly resistance there. And looking very bullish, especially when you look at it on a monthly basis, also looking relatively bullish. But this is technically a downtrend, lower highs, lower lows. So it's a mess. So in case you're trading currencies and just feeling like, this is ridiculous, and you're new to the whole thing, don't be thrown. These are particularly junk conditions. And this kind of proves my point. Dollar yen here, looking here at the last, going back to even, let's kind of call it 18th of August, this price has done nothing. This is insane. And if you look at it what I mean is insane, I just mean these are poor trading conditions. Now, part of that, I'm going to deviate from my usual thing, is going to have a look at the VIX, which is a volatility index for those of you who aren't really familiar with it. And so the VIX is really kind of tracking the general volatility of the markets, and it's very low at the moment. Okay, so what does that mean for us as traders? It really means that there's a shortage of really good trends when the volatility is quite low. So we start to see like certain strategies will simply start to be more successful when we go above certain levels. So I've kind of marked 15, 20, 25, and we really haven't been above 25 very much or for very long periods of time. But during these periods, there would be some much better trends. And so this is just something to keep an eye on. I've set alerts for myself so I can, if I'm not checking it every day, but if it does start to break into the upper bands, that would imply that there'll be some more trends, or just simply more trends, or perhaps trends will last slightly longer. And so therefore, in terms of statistics and probabilities, more winning trades as soon as the market starts to actually do something. But right now, it's just sitting on the monthly time frame. You can see here it's sitting right down at these lows, and that's just not that much fun. So it's going back to dollar Swissy, just a mess. Excuse me, just a mess. Basically, don't touch me, don't trade me. Dollar CAD. Okay, so dollar CAD is now in a downtrend on the daily, coming down and testing 1.25, which is a monthly level. It is still in an uptrend on the weekly. And it's actually in a downtrend on the monthly. So potentially, yes, potentially here it's going to, if it breaks the low of last month, then I would expect the market to potentially continue to head down. So out of dollar yen and dollar Swissy, which are pure junk at the moment, dollar CAD is the most appealing. This is where the dollar is the base pair. And on the rest, Aussie and Kiwi might have stronger trends. So out of those, I prefer Aussie, Kiwi, and dollar CAD. Let's have a look at some of the other currency pairs of interest here. So just highlighting, we've had a really strong move up on the yen crosses, and that seems more in line with that monthly move to the upside. We've had a good, healthy correction back down into the moving averages, and we've produced a swing low there. So here, if this price action follows through on this behavior, it's going to continue back up to 133. What I'd like to see it do, though, is break and retest 130.50 before working its way up to 132.50 this week. Similarly with pound yen, again, we've got those high lows, very similar to what we saw with sterling against the US dollar. And we've got a potential bullish setup here, nice healthy correction, and sort of quite a lot of buyers below this level on that monthly price action. We still have we're still on a downtrend effectively here with lower highs, low lows, but we do have a high low. So a break above 152, which we've effectively got, and a break above these highs starts to look more and more bullish. And then it sits on my buying list in terms of looking for long opportunities. Euro Aussie. So last week, just to jump ahead quickly, last week I spoke about pound Aussie coming back to test these levels, and I said also if it's just too clean, too neat, then it can often fail. Thankfully, in this particular case, although price did pull back to this area and set up with some nice potential buy opportunities, it didn't trigger them. It actually ended up coming back down. And so now what I'll be looking for is similarly on a Euro Aussie are pullbacks into these previous highs, and then looking for shorting opportunities to the downside. Or alternatively, if it carries straight on down, pullbacks into these levels to continue lower there, even though there is kind of now, we've broken this uptrend on that weekly, but on the monthly, we're actually coming down and testing 1.80509 within an uptrend for support. So it just makes everything very tricky. It does mean that if price does head down and test 1.8509, I want to see it break through that and to find resistance and head lower. Because which one of these is going to basically play out? Is it going to be the monthly finding support in this area and resuming its trend, which makes sense. It's coming back down to these levels of resistance or previous highs, potentially fib levels, finding support and continuing up. So this week, that is my only real kind of caution, is what's going to happen with a monthly. Are we going to find that price comes down to this level as part of a monthly correction and then resumes its uptrend? Okay, or alternatively, is this trend now going to continue to the downside? Okay, so all of those are potential outcomes of that. And it is very annoying because it's kind of like, well, this could happen and this could happen and this could happen. But in those situations, there's a reason why, because we just don't have a lot of strong trends. And so it has become less predictable. Level of support coming back down. This is where we are at this point in time. And again, with Euro Aussie, similar to that, I'm now kind of leaning towards move to the downside. So unlike pound Aussie, which is coming back to a major level of support, you know, here I do lean towards us breaking these lows and starting to looking for those lows to the downside. But yes, pound Aussie could effectively find strong support and become bullish again. Then having a look at Aussie yen, one of the things I do like here, we've got a nice little swing low on that monthly. We've broken this downtrend on the weekly, and so we've closed nicely above the previous highs here. I'd really like to see either some pullbacks and looking for longs, continuing to the upside, or breaks, moves higher, pulling back and testing that. So this is really certainly sitting on my trading plan list for this week. And finishing off with Aussie Swissy, which is going to be a similar approach to what we've seen. It's had a really long move, and usually in situations like this, we do need some kind of a pullback. But if it does continue, perhaps a pullback down to test these levels anywhere in here, looking for opportunities to find more moves to the upside. And again, we've got that swing low on the monthly. So Aussie, Swissy, and Aussie effectively have the same approach in terms of trading plans. You can see that very strong bullish divergence between these extreme lows, but very extreme moves, a deep retracement, a big move down, a very deep retracement. This is usually volatility on a much higher time frame. It's kind of swinging between those. But yeah, looking for this to change trend to the upside and seeing how that goes. And now moving on to the precious metals, starting off with gold. So gold, beautifully, having followed through, now looking nice and bullish, following through from this really strong rejection of the lows. Just has to break its way through this 1830 level. So I'm just going to stick that in as a level of resistance. But absolutely, my expectation this week is it should succeed in doing that. But having said that, I want to see a breakthrough and then looking for buys to the upside, certainly back up to 1900 if we can successfully get through this level of resistance. Okay, you can see here we had a bit of a knockback, then we had a deeper knockback. We're back up at that level again. Gold is certainly very keen to try to get over the line there, and I like that idea. Silver now into an uptrend on the daily, still within a downtrend on that weekly, by the way, but also this is a range. Again, we've got another range here, so I'm just going to mark this again with these levels here, just go and frame that range. We're still within that, and so moves to the upside here are acceptable, or at least would make sense within range-like behavior, especially if in the longer run silver is ultimately going to break to the upside. So I'm bullish on these. I prefer the look of gold, but if I do see some moves to the upside on silver, that is certainly on the table. I like that. Let's have a look at West Texas Intermediate. Some nice crude oil, looking nice and bullish. Managed to have a bit of a recovery. It's broken the previous highs on the daily, so that downtrend is done. That weekly is still in a downtrend, technically of lower highs, lower lows, but that's a really nice bullish engulfing candle. We've followed through on the break of the high there, so this is more bullish than bearish. And so look, again, this could turn out to be part of just increased volatility in this range, but I'd like to see if there are some opportunities to the upside on that. Brent crude, looking at UK oil, nice uptrend on the daily here, high lows, high highs, starting to twitch a bit as it comes into 74. So I need to see it break past these previous highs to feel a lot more confident about that. You can see on the monthly here, it's produced, had these strong rejections of the lows. It's effectively being propped up at some point. Yes, a nice connection down with the moving averages would be great. Alternatively, it's going to go sideways until the moving averages connect with it, and then it breaks up to the upside if that's something that's going to happen over the coming months. So cautious with it, but kind of cautiously bullish, but also acknowledging that these highs, that we could see something that really only starts to make sense to us in the coming months as we realize that a longer term consolidation is playing out. So that's where my caution comes from. Right, now moving on to the global indices, starting off with the Dow. Really nice move to the upside, so still not really managing to break past that level of resistance, not gaining too much new ground on the Dow at any rate, and actually starting to go a little bit smaller. So currently the monthly candle, just a really tiny little indecision candle. That could turn, in hindsight down the line, could turn out to be very significant. Okay, I'm curious to see how that goes. I'm still, as I said, leaning a little bit more bullish, but there's no doubt that we are struggling now to kind of gain new ground with the kind of degree that we did earlier here. You can see the larger candles just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so that being the case, look at the S&P, which has done incredibly well. It's just a beautiful test of this last week that I spoke about, and now pushing back up. But look at the last few days, not really breaking much ground. And again, that monthly candle looking like a tiny little doji or indecision candle. Okay, again, same here with the NASDAQ, trying to break through these highs, potentially consolidating, yeah, still looking relatively nice and bullish. Again, also a small little candle. So this week, I'd like to see if we can really change the shape of that monthly candle, but if we don't, by this time next week, that starts to indicate that we might be taking, again, as I said, at some point we're obviously going to have a bigger correction, but smaller candles would be a great point for that to be the case. A small indecision candle would be a really good turning point for that in hindsight. Looking at the Russell 2000, this had a really nice recovery. I love the fact that it's broken above these previous highs, coming back and testing these levels. And so pullbacks down to test this level for support, offering some potential buy opportunities. Let's just extend this a little bit. And looking for those possible buy opportunities there. But it's really nice to see it heading back up to the top of its range over here. And then now moving away from the US, going and having a look at the UK. Okay, again, struggling a little bit with these highs here, so starting to slow down. All right, not showing too much bullishness there. Again, just caution for me on the week. So for intraday trading, not opposed to buys, probably that. But if starting to also, starting to see if this stumbling behavior that's happened in the past is starting to crop up again, because we have that consolidation, then we start moving, and then we're kind of consolidating again. So just a little bit more caution there. Look at that weekly one with just multiple kind of bearish candles there. Well, I say that this one's a little bit more bullish, but it's still a red sellers candle all around that 16,000 level. And this monthly candle now starting to be more bearish. So here what happens is simply looking at these, you just simply got more bearish candles starting to show up now. Interesting to see that versus last week, which was still looking quite bullish. Now it's starting to show those signs again. And again, here there's a bit of that weekly indecision candle. This is on the Euro Stocks index. And again, that really monthly small candle. So this very curiouser and curiouser. Look at the Nikkei recovering here. So this was a really this was one of the more bearish indexes that had been hitting lower for quite some time. And look at that immediate recovery. So all of this, actually, this is where it gets interesting. To me, the weaker ones looking really bullish. If the weaker indices are looking really bullish, that implies that the stronger indices are probably more likely just going through a consolidation. Okay, it's unusual for the weaker ones to have a really strong rebound back over this level, like just broken through that 28,000 level and going back up into these highs. Okay, so for me, I want to see, because here you can see there's really strong resistance at that 30,000. I want to see what happens when we get up to that. But that's certainly implying that there's still some juice in the markets. Again, we've got that weekly one here, a bit of a bullish outside and indecision candle as well. So not offering too much clarity there, pushing up almost a little bit like a hanging man over here. So that's quite interesting as well. All of these implying just caution as we approach the highs, because that's really where the challenge is. And so, yeah, it's possible this week we could simply just have a consolidation, which means it could ultimately end up being choppy and the market might end up going nowhere. That is a possibility this week. So I find that interesting. Let's move on and have a look at the equities of interest. Starting off with American Express, this has continued its swing high and a very hugely much needed correction down, ideally back down towards 140, still looking more bearish than bullish, and that looks really nice and healthy. So I'm happy to see that happen. I'm not happy to see things lose value, but I am happy to see them go through their winter summer phases. They do need to do it. Let's have a look at ARK Innovation. ARK Innovation looks like it's managing to tread water. It's still relatively strong and healthy overall here. It's got a higher low here, but it still hasn't broken these highs here, so then it can potentially go into an uptrend on that weekly again. But yeah, again, looking sort of indecision to bullish, whereas the previous one looking more bearish. Berkshire Hathaway. So Berkshire Hathaway here, kind of again, a little bit of an inside bearish monthly candle so far. We are on an uptrend on the weekly. So can I find support at these previous highs? So let me just mark that to see if that ends up becoming significant. If we end up to stay above that, but if we end up coming back down here, we start to produce a more bearish picture starting to head towards those lows. So in other words, if we do break down, come back down to test these lows, we start to breach those. Obviously, then we start to have a bit more of a correction on that monthly time frame. BP. Okay, so BP producing a little bit of a bullish candle on the inside there. Some buyers coming back in there, but haven't really moved it very much. I want to see if this week we break back down again, we hit a little bit lower, or if we can actually push a little bit higher. So I'm going to jump ahead and just compare this to, say, Exxon to see how that goes. That's kind of still a little bit of a bullish indecision candle there. It's really trying to stay above these levels, but finished this week a little bit lower. So again, if it falls to this level, we get that bigger correction happening back down into these old highs here at 51. And back down towards that 50 level. So it'd be interesting to see how that happens, if it can recover again from that. Let's go back up and have a look at Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola still bumping its head up against the highs. You can see that really bullish recovery there, but it has to get past that level. So a couple of these might actually just not be able to go much higher without that. General Motors. Really great correction last month. A little bit of a smaller candle at the moment. Still looking relatively bearish from these moves. Hasn't progressed much. So this is where it's fighting the good fight, sitting at these recent lows. If it can stay above those and manage to recover from that. Otherwise, my expectation is for this to continue back down towards these $40 levels. So we'll see how that unfolds. And JP Morgan Chase, which I was actually talking about how that's managed to really hold its own. Again, here you can see a move up and then a small correction, then a big push up, and then it's come back halfway. So this is a good area for it to turn around. If it does want to continue and go back up, it's not a bad place for it to do it, right in these old highs. It's a great area for it to push up a little bit higher. So I would say that if it does fail to do that, and this week it actually starts to head a little bit lower, again, then we're starting to see that correction, potentially even down towards that 136 level. So just keeping an eye on a few of these. Morgan Stanley has done incredibly well. Okay, there's now clear bearish divergence here. So you've got between this new high, you've got a lower high in the MACD and the RSI. And that just really implies that this 105 level could turn out to be too much for it, and it might end up having to hit a little bit lower. So for me, and again, this is certainly in the area here, up here, for a nice healthy correction back down to say 80. So that's interesting to me. Even though they're really nice and bullish, and they are indeed, I'm going to see if we start to break the low of last week or start to break these lows here and see if we get a bit more of a correction. Alternatively, it can break above the high. There might be some good buy opportunities off the previous highs off that. And that might end up being the week after next. Nvidia looking solid. I mean, that's a really nice bullish candle, looking really nice and solid. Now starting to form a little bit of a hanging man there, looking quite nice and bullish off that monthly. But my concern is just that the moves to the upside are going to be smaller now, not necessarily as strong. But let's just see that's still looking one of the best of the bunch. It makes sense here. We've got these swing lows on the weekly on PayPal. And there's no reason why I couldn't attempt to continue to push up to 309, take another run at it. Nothing here that necessarily says weakness, unless the rest of the market decides to head lower, then that will pull it down. Royal Mail back into these old highs, back into the moving averages. Nothing new to add here. You can just see what I would talk about here. So you can see how that's kind of hard selling has slowed right down here. Okay, so the question here is, can this level of support hold? Can it produce a solid swing low and start to climb again? Or is it just going to fall through that level of support and just collapse lower? It's in a good area to turn around. There's nothing wrong with this area. If it can turn around, if the market is going to be optimistic and bullish, this is a great area for it to start to do that. I think what I prefer to see is a bit more of a bullish monthly candle there at this point in time. I'm not convinced just yet. It's a little bit too soon. I'd like to see that on the monthly. The spider here, where I just highlighted that as a potential, where the buyers are coming back in here, here's another one at this point where that looks pretty cool. And that one now starting to look a little bit more bullish as well. We've broken above the high of that. It's had a really good, healthy correction. This is what I'd like to see it do this week, break above these highs outside of this range and do that. Alternatively, again, as I said, if it starts to come back down towards these lows immediately, that is not a good sign, but I would expect it to continue higher first. Tesla, actually having had a bit of a wobble, it's now started to, appears to be taking shape, appears to be actually forming more of a bullish move. It's got to get past these old highs here, okay, but it is in a solid uptrend on the weekly. It's in an uptrend on the daily. Just broken a little bit above that high and starting to stall almost immediately again. But I would say it's a little bit more bullish than bearish. So some of these ones, if they're basically looking really, really bullish and then they just for no reason have a correction across the board, if we take, 2 or 3 of the best ones here and they all have moves to the downside this week, the implication is towards the longer term timeframes, those monthly charts starting to take a bit more of a breather. Vanguard here also having had a really, really good run. Looks like it's just due a little bit of a healthy correction coming back down in towards a kind of here, sort of towards that 411.80 mark. Would be nice and healthy for it to do that and then take a continuation to the upside. Aside from that monthly overextension, there's no other signs of weakness in this chart. There's no divergence. It looks nice and bullish, nice and healthy. There's no real reason why this should, other than that monthly chart, there's no reason why we should see a deeper correction. So I'd be very curious to see how this goes if we do ultimately get that. But Vanguard looking fantastic. Right, so moving on to the bonds. Okay, so what's going on with those? So last week I spoke about, the previous week I was talking about these being really nice and bullish. Then I spoke about them not really going anywhere, and we haven't really gone anywhere as such. We're still stuck within this range. So this is what I'm looking for again over this coming week. See if we break the lows, which supports the idea of there still being some enthusiasm to do with equities, money still flowing in that direction. Alternatively, we start to break above the highs in combination with drops across some of those stronger equities. That implies that there could very kind of be that shift. There could be, we could be at a tipping point, or it could be something that happens over the next few months where the market is starting to move away from equities, starting to, go into other areas. Be interesting to me to see exactly how, I haven't got there yet, but let's see how the cryptos have behaved. Because one of the things that I'm going to be keeping an eye on, because it may be historic, is when we have our next really big correction, what's going to happen with cryptos? Will they tank as well, or will they be fine? Will they stabilize? In other words, will they have become an additional safe haven option? That's what's going to be fascinating to me, because can you imagine what they would do in terms of validation for cryptos? Euro bubble, solid downtrend on the daily, looking more bearish than anything else, coming back down on that weekly uptrend back into these previous highs. So this one looks a little bit more like it wants to hit a little bit lower. It looks more bearish, supporting the idea of kind of healthy equities. Same thing with the EURJPY. And they are sort of behaving a little bit range-like as well. Let's move on to cryptos. Okay, so we didn't get much out of those treasuries. They're just not offering much, but they're not looking super bullish. Okay, so not offering, certainly not looking that much, and not looking that appealing to me from that. So Bitcoin managed to do a recovery. There we go. So we're back up at 50,000. I'd like to see it push past this, find support, and just continue on back up, or start its journey back up towards 60,000. Overall, looking fine. The size of these candles fine in relation to previous early moves. I'd like to see if that's going to be the case. So should we find equities do a drop and cryptos climb, that would be of interest to me next week as well. Neo looking nice and bullish, back up into these highs. So can I get past those? Similar to, I mean, on a monthly, it looks good to go. On a weekly, it's just got to break through this level of resistance. Okay, that's really the case here. I should move Ethereum up. Ethereum having a wonderful week. Back into its old highs. Okay, into this area, but very different price action this time around. Doesn't mean it won't get knocked back, but again, it's also got key levels this week. So interesting to me, so far, some of these cryptos all right at key levels. Can they push through them this week? They are looking nice and bullish, but I want to see that before I make any kind of longer term commitments to that. Cardano also slowing down a little bit on their weekly. Look at these big bullish candles, slightly smaller ones, indecision, could be due for a bit of a correction, but it's also got a level that it has to work its way through. Interesting. Dogecoin, not suffering from the same challenges, having pulled back, produced a bullish weekly candle. Can we break the high of that? Then I would like to see this continue to move to the upside if we can break the high before we break the low. And Ripple, it's got its own level of resistance, no surprise there. So in fact, the only one that's doing its own thing, Dogecoin, so far. And again, keeping an eye on these volatility levels that look like they're just creeping right down. They're just failing to get up there. I would love to see, you know, for traders all around the world, I'd love to see these volatility levels increase and that just start to provide a lot more movement in the markets. Yeah, and that's it, ladies and gents. Yeah, some of those of interest, some of the currencies may do well. Generally speaking, it's just a little bit muddy, and so I'm just going to be cautious across some of those different markets. But cryptos, yeah, looking bullish if they can break through those resistance levels. Gold, certainly gold and silver, precious metals, higher on my list than most of the other things. There we go. So I want to wish you a fantastic week. Thank you very much, and chat to you next week.